So first of all, good morning and welcome to our session today for Carers Rights Day. My name is Ellen and I manage the programme team here at Carers First. I am joined by a panel of experts and I'll introduce those to you in just a moment. So today is Carers Rights Day. It's an annual day on helping carers to know and understand their rights, and it gives opportunity to raise awareness to carers and share information around the help and support that they're entitled to. This year's theme is Your Rights, today, tomorrow, and in the future. So this session will answer all your questions around planning and thinking ahead. So let me introduce the panel to you. So I'm going to start off with Kelly, who's joined us today. Kelly is the founder of Argo Life and Legacy. I'm also joined by Anne-Marie, who is a carer who's kindly joined us this morning. And I also have Chloe with me, who is from Carers First. You will notice also in the chat that I have a couple of colleagues in the room to support with any questions that you might be adding in there. So also what I'd like to say is if you have got any questions, please add them into the chat function. And thank you to those that have already sent questions in advance via email or through our Facebook community page. We will, during the session, be having some presentations from the experts that are in the room with me, but we will also have a question and answer session at the end. If we can't answer your question today, we will be sharing with you after the session a question and answer resource that will be emailed to you and also added to our Carers Rights page. Firstly, I'd like to hand over to Kelly, who's going to be talking to us around legal planning and why it's so important to consider thinking about the future. Kelly.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me? I'm hoping you can, as I don't think I'm on mute. So the subject that I've been given is absolutely huge and it's my entire business. So to cover absolutely everything you need to know about planning and the future in 10 minutes is not going to be doable. My husband's tried to extract everything in my head for 8 years and he's still not there yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick whistle stop tour of the sort of the things that you need to think about if you are caring for somebody. And the reason I do a quick whistle stop tour is because if you want any further information, I'm happy to work with the Carers First team so we can actually do some more discrete packages and workshops for you if you need to, and the girls would like that. So there are a few important things that you need to think about when you're caring for somebody. And if you get these straight and sorted early days in your journey of caring and illness and well-being, then what it means is you can go off and do all the fun stuff that you want to do and make those memories with your families. So if you're ready and you've got your pens and papers ready for a little bit of note taking, off we go with subject number 1. The first thing is you need absolutely to make sure that you understand what capacity means. You are going to encounter a lot of medical professionals, social workers, and experts as you go through your journey. And those experts are going to be determining whether or not the person you're caring for makes decisions for themselves or whether somebody else has to make those decisions for them. Now, capacity isn't a line in the sand. There is not one single point in time at which you either have it or you don't. It's this big murky grey puddle that gets a little bit clearer some days, darker some days. And a lot of us will spend a huge amount of time in the murky grey bit where capacity isn't clear. Now, there are a number of tests that I use when I'm assessing capacity, so there is no blanket assessment. So if somebody says your cared for person does not have capacity to make a decision, and you've got a niggly little feeling in your gut saying, I don't agree with that, make sure you challenge what they are saying to you, because you know that person better than anybody else and you have the benefit of knowing their entire life and how they react rather than one small snapshot window. So get some advice on capacity, what it means for you and how it can impact the decisions that you as a carer have to make as well. If you have capacity problems, actually, whether you do or don't, I'm not really that bothered. Everybody over the age of 18 needs to have a lasting power of attorney. And there are 2 types. One relates to money and one relates to health and welfare. Financial one is practical. It does what it says on the tin. From the moment it's registered with the Office of the Public Guardian, who are the administrative arm of the special court that look after people with vulnerabilities, that document can be used by the appointed attorneys to help people pay bills, claim benefits, and do all the financial sensible things that you need to do every day to continue to make your world go around. If you have health concerns and it's really important to you about the end of life care that you have or care that you receive when making decisions for yourself is quite important, you need to have a health and welfare power of attorney. And I actually think that this is more important than the financial form. This form is about me as a person. What happens to me when I don't have a voice? Whether social services can bully my family into putting me into a care home. They don't do that, but it feels like it if they're sitting in front of a room with you and saying that your family member can't come home. It allows you to be able to discuss medical issues, dental issues, silly little things like the optician, the podiatrist, with the pharmacist about medication that people are taking. And it puts you in a position where you can have informed conversations with medical professionals that are then able to listen to you because you are the voice of the person that you are caring for. If the person you're looking after doesn't have the ability to make lasting powers of attorney, because we do have to test to see whether they can do these because they have to understand the form, don't despair. There is a route called the deputyship route through the Court of Protection, and this is where the court will process an application from somebody who asks to be appointed as a deputy. So, a bit like an attorney, but just in a different route. And that deputy will then be able to manage finances or health and welfare needs. But if you take anything key from today, get your lasting powers of attorney done because you really don't want to get involved with the Court of Protection. It's really hard work. Make sure you review your wills. Topic number 3. So we've got capacity, powers of attorney, and deputyship, which are kind of the two sides of the same coin. Wills. It's really important that you make sure you have an up-to-date will and that you review your will. Many people don't know that wills are really great planning tools for being able to protect assets for care purposes in the future. As many of you may already know, if you hold assets more than £23,250, you are going to have to fund the cost of your care. When you're looking at care, you are only assessing the finances of the individual that requires care, not anybody else living with the house in the household and not their spouse. It's just their money. There are special rules relating to properties, there are special rules relating to some pensions, and there are special rules relating to some investments that people hold. That could mean that those items are exempt from the whole funding circle. So it's important that you get some advice so you know what applies to you and when. Even if you don't know the nuts and bolts and the ins and outs of it, you've still got an idea about what you need to do. And the care is really important because if you don't get it right in the first place, you could be paying extra care over and above what you should have, or you could be paying for care that you shouldn't actually even be paying for at all. So it's really important that you are aware of how the care works so that if you need to take protection in your wills for your assets, you can put that protection in place. And it's really simple. We do that by using something called a trust, where we don't give all of our assets to the person who may be unwell so that they can be used for care. We move them to the side and we put them in a special protected pocket where the local authority and the benefits agency cannot get at funds. And these are really important for somebody living with dementia, somebody who's living with Parkinson's, other health conditions, or if you're caring for children who've got life limiting illnesses or learning disabilities. Now, if that person dies unexpectedly or sooner than you think, you may not have got all of these things in place. And don't worry, because there are provisions set by the law called the intestacy rules, which determine who benefits from your estate and by how much. Now, these aren't necessarily going to work the way that you want them, because depending upon whether you're married, you have children, surviving parents, surviving family members, the rules will be slightly different for you. So the best way to avoid relying on those intestacy provisions is by making a will. So that's really, really important. The last thing really that I want to sort of talk to you about is do not resuscitate orders. Now, these are a little sort of wonky area that people get quite confused about. And I have got a specific question that I will be dealing with this at the Q&A session at the end. So rather than spend any more of my allotted time, because I do believe I'm already 3 minutes running over, I will deal with that at the end session. But whilst other people are talking, if you have any legal questions, I'm happy to answer them and type the answers in the chat if that would help you. Otherwise, I'll wait and see if anybody wants some help from me in the future, and then I'll get on and sort out with the girls what you need. It was lovely speaking to you. Have a good day.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. I couldn't unmute myself there. Kelly, thank you very much for that section. It was really informative, and I know there was lots of information there for people to take on board. So what I'm going to do is there's two things here. People can pop some questions into the bar, and like Kelly said, she can answer those. We can either do those today or in that after resource. Alternatively, if we go across and signpost you to our Carers First website, we've got some great articles on there. We've got a library of articles that can support you around emergency planning, planning for the future, and those conversations around future care wishes. And we'll have some links added into the chat in a moment. Next, I'd like to welcome Anne-Marie. Anne-Marie is one of our carers who's registered with us, who has been or who was caring for her late husband and is now caring for her mum. And she's kindly joined us today for Carers Right Day to share her experience around planning. So welcome to the panel, Anne-Marie. I have got a few questions for you. We'll be nice and gentle, but we're really appreciative of you being able to share your experience with us. So, Chloe, could you?
Yeah, thank you. I couldn't unmute there. I'm so sorry.
No worries. We're going to have a technical hitch anywhere. So, Anne-Marie, our first question over to you is to think about, when did you first recognise that you needed to start planning for the future?
I think when there was a significant change in my husband's health condition, we'd had what I call the normal illnesses, arthritis, heart, things where we'd be seeing a consultant. But when he got sepsis really bad, it meant that his mobility and capacity was greatly reduced. So at that point, I had to start thinking about the future, because there was these significant changes. When thinking about that, one of the first things I did was to put a power of attorney in place. That was for both health and for finances. And I also had to have some really, really difficult conversations with him, very, very uncomfortable conversations. And, you know, they were done very early, and it's important to do that very early, because you need to be able to understand that when capacity and mobility change, the person changes. So you need to know very early on what their wishes are.
Thank you for sharing that. And it sounds like those conversations could have been, you know, difficult at times. But what was the impact of having those conversations when thinking about the future? Why was it important to have those conversations?
Having the conversations about care was really important, because it took the pressure off. Although they're difficult, it enabled me to have a better understanding of what their care could look like going forward. It wasn't about me taking over. It was definitely not that. It was still involving the cared for, but it was making sure that they understood where I was coming from, and that I was there to support and not to take over. It was also that we were able to talk about things like a DNR, a do not resuscitate, because there was many times in the years that and the illnesses that doctors would come to us and say that we need to put a DNR in place. So knowing what my husband's wishes were, which was to continue with any medical interventions, I was able to support that and to do that confidently and respect his wishes. Although I felt great guilt about him dying, I was confident that I could fulfill what he wanted, and I knew that what I was doing was the right thing for him.
And what kind of things helped you through those conversations?
I think helping me was getting right at the beginning, getting the right information. You know, it's very difficult when you're in the crisis of caring that things you live minute by minute, day by day. But it is so important to start planning and having the conversations and getting the right information. The first thing I did was have an open and honest conversation with my husband about my abilities, about what I could do to support him and care for him. And also for him to tell me what he thought his care would look like with my support. I also accessed support from social services, and they came and they offered lots of resources, support, information around his condition, what could be offered from their point of view. They guided us through things that we needed to. Also, we had to talk about finances because the care packages and things, because he was not eligible for the continuing healthcare packages. So we needed to go through things like that, which can be quite difficult sometimes. And I think also being able to self-advocate, it was something I didn't learn to do correctly or properly until I became a carer. And it's amazing how once you can get the confidence to self-advocate, how it empowers you to be able to do the role that you're doing as a carer very well.
And so you've just mentioned self-advocacy, which is really important. It's something that we encourage our carers to learn how to do, because you need to be able to talk with professionals. And you did mention about how important it was to you. But in terms of the planning and talking with professionals, because you mentioned, you know, your husband had reduced capacity at times, so therefore you was talking on his behalf. How important was it to have that self-advocacy resource or training to you?
I think for me it was important because the terminology when you're working with professionals is quite different to the terminology you would use. And sometimes they would forget that as a carer that you didn't have the understanding of the long words or the terms or everything else. So sometimes you might be agreeing to something, you have no idea what you're agreeing with, especially around capacity. And as Kelly sort of touched on slightly, there is a lot of areas that you need to be able to understand to get through. It was having the skills and the tools. A lot of this came from support from other organisations, even like Carers First, things like that, to try and help me to be able to understand. It was asking the questions, taking the time, asking somebody, what does this mean? Looking it up, asking other professionals. Sometimes the conversations with social services can be very, very tough because you're having to try and balance your needs, the cared for's needs, and what's available to support you. But with being able to self-advocate, I could then get the balance right. I could be vocal on what was needed, be able to push when I needed to. It also gave a solution-focused way that social services could work with. So there was a plan. So it was like a plan. They knew where I was coming from and what was needed. And it meant that although it was very difficult to start with, it started to get easier. And the more times you do it, the more confident you become. And then you realise that you're in charge of what you're doing to support, which is very, very important. And it meant that I was able to sustain this caring role with my late husband for over 10 years, which I couldn't have done if I couldn't have self-advocated for myself.
And do you feel that by being able to self-advocate, you was able to feel more involved and included around support plans, around, you know, treatment plans? It sounded like it definitely may have been tricky in the beginning, but like you said, that was a really good tip. The practice is what's needed to gain that confidence. So thank you for sharing around that, and that's what helped you. So as you know, going from being a former carer for one person and then now caring for somebody else, what advice would you give other carers that are in the room around getting ahead and thinking about that planning for the future?
I think the first thing is to take up all opportunities with any organisation. So whether it's Carers First to get advice, you know, say this is your situation, what help can you give me? I think when you're working with social services, make sure that you get your statutory carers assessment. It is vital. I think that everybody should go through the process to see what's on offer and to be honest in what's going on, you know, not try and be heroic, because there was times I was very heroic because I felt I was protecting my cared for. That's not how it is. You have to protect yourself as well. So having a statutory carers assessment is vital. Having a social cares needs assessment for the cared for. Sometimes they don't want it, but sometimes by doing it, it will highlight different areas of support, which might not necessarily always be just carers coming in. You know, there's other agencies that are there for the cared for, but they're actually supporting you, especially if it's around capacity, dementias, things like that, and around mobility. So there is things like physiotherapists, things like that can come in and help you. I think also having a communication system. One of the things that I will advocate to anybody, if you've got a smartphone, put a WhatsApp group on there, and those people that are involved around you, like family, do that. It means you're doing a tell all once. You know, documents can be uploaded, things can be uploaded, links can be uploaded, but everybody knows day to day what's happening. You know, if there's medicine changes, which lots of times there'll be changes from hospitals, something going on at hospital, you know, consultants have said this, things like that. It is vitally important to do that. And it's also something you can share information out of there as well. So if you weren't able to make a meeting with social services or something, your person who's going to represent you has got all the information to hand. They're aware of the situation and they can then advocate for you. I'm also a working carer. Continue to do it how, I don't know sometimes, but I did it all the way through this. And it was important for me to talk to my employee. It was important that I spoke to them. It was important that I did a carer's passport to make sure that if anything changed, that my employee was absolutely up to date on any changes for me. That made me feel that I could still continue to try and be me at the same time, as well as doing this. So those are the most important things. Get the assessments done, have a communication system in place. And if you are a working carer, let them know as well.
Some great tips there. I was really thinking how amazing that WhatsApp idea was, you know, that tell all once, because quite often when we're speaking with carers, they kind of say, well, actually, I've got so many people that want to know what's happening, and you're doing all of these messages, you're getting all these questions in, but actually having that one point where everybody is in there communicating with one another, I think it's absolutely great. And I think in terms of thinking about that planning in place, like you said, if anything were to happen to you, you know that there were people in your network that understood the situation generally and what was happening. And also with talking to your employer is so important. We've got some great resources on the website for working carers to support with those discussions as well. Thank you, Anne-Marie, for sharing your experience with us and taking the time and for sharing, you know, those lessons learned. And I hope that, you know, you can take those forward now you're supporting your mum. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Chloe, who's going to share with us some details around some tailored support that is available at Carers First.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for the introduction, Ellen. Just while you get up the slides, I didn't realise I was going to be the only one with slides. I suppose I like being a little bit different, but hopefully they're just used as a visual tool, but I'll certainly go through everything that's on there. In this part of the session, we just wanted to take a moment really to share some of the resources that Carers First have to help carers access the support they need, very much in theme with Carers Rights Day. So firstly, just a quick introduction. Like Ellen said, my name is Chloe, and I'm the project officer for Carers First, working on the programmes of support. So over the last 12 months, my role has really been to develop information, advice, resources, support for carers in specific caring situations. And basically, you can find a library of everything that we have available so far on the Carers First website. And when you get there, it will look a little bit like what you see on the screen now. So as it's already been mentioned, the theme for Carers Rights Day is your rights today, tomorrow, and in the future. And this presentation will kind of follow that in that theme a little bit. So thinking about your rights today, a great first step is to understand how and what you can access as a carer. So things like a carer's assessment and a flu jab. When we speak to carers, they often say to us, we don't even know where to start. We don't know what we don't know. So to help with this, we've put together a carer's checklist, which is available on our website. And I'm sure there'll be a link put into the chat for you to have a look at it as well. We'll also put all the resources that we share in a post-session email, so you'll have access to those too. So thinking about your rights today also includes accessing the support that you need to look after your well-being. And as you will have heard many times before, about maintaining that balance in your caring role. So in this, we have things like our website articles, downloadable checklists, and more. These are all bespoke for each caring situation. So it includes things like supporting someone with dementia, who's older and frail, and who has a mental health condition, to name a few. So going into these in a little bit more detail, I wanted to share a couple of examples of the type of content that we've been able to produce in co-production with carers. So on the left-hand side, you'll notice 2 article headings. When speaking to carers in focus groups and in sessions, we asked what specific things that they wanted to know more about when it came to caring for someone in their specific situation. And these are just 2 examples of the questions that came out and we've been able to produce content on. In the middle, you have one of our checklists, and at the bottom, a link to one of our courses. So these are things that when we've created the content, we've been able to say, actually, this kind of piece of information, and this is really helpful for somebody going through that particular point in that caring journey. So, for example, the checklist might be for someone at the start of that journey, and the course might be for when things change, just for as an example. And then on the right-hand side, we have an example of the video resources that we've now got on our YouTube channel. Now, these have been developed with carers, and they share the real lives and caring roles of some of the carers that we support. And again, they cover some of the topics and questions that carers asked us in those focus groups, kind of matching up to the content and the website articles that we've got on there already. So as we go on to the next slide and skip ahead a little to the future, there are a number of ways that carers can start to care for their future, which is one of the titles we bounced around for this session. So thinking about advanced care planning, emergency planning, and looking at the financial support available. Now, Kelly and Anne-Marie have both shared their, the brilliant insight and knowledge into those things, but there are resources and more information on the website as well. So when looking at the future as a whole, it can be really overwhelming at times. And that is mainly because there is so much to know, so much to put into place right at that very beginning. But putting them in place step by step, little by little, it can give carers peace of mind that should these situations arise, or when they arise, you feel prepared to be able to take those on. So we've been putting together, and we will be sharing this in the post-session resource, a planning for the future checklist. Now, this will just give you a few hints, tips, tricks, and a bit more information about things to think about when planning for the future. So you'll notice I missed the part in the middle around the rights for tomorrow. Now, I didn't really understand when first looking at the theme about why they had tomorrow and in the future looking slightly differently for the theme of Carers' Rights Day. And when I did some research, it was all around the recognition that the law is continuously changing. And in that tomorrow section, they've actually included the fact that we've got the new carers leave bill coming in, giving carers 5 days unpaid leave, and changes to the flexible working regulations, which will make it easier for people to apply for flexible working. And they're due to come in any time now and be implemented. And I know some organisations are ahead of the game in terms of getting those in place. So these will help carers who are trying to balance that caring role with work and other life commitments to be able to maintain that balance a bit easier going forward. So that's the today, the future, and the tomorrow in the order that I've done it. So the final thing I wanted to cover was self-advocacy. Once carers know what their rights are, and hopefully this has just given you, like Kelly called it earlier, a whistle-stop tour, it's important to have the skills and confidence to be able to stand up for these rights. And this isn't about going out and doing campaigns or protests, but being able to be informed, confident, and forward-thinking in those conversations. So what we've done is put together a toolkit, which will offer carers some resources, some spreadsheets, some info sheets, that kind of thing, to use when thinking about self-advocacy and preparing for a meeting where you might need to self-advocate. If you want to know more information about self-advocacy, want to explore it in a bit more detail, we do actually have a self-advocacy session in our Caring Confidently course, which you can sign up to as a carer, and that's on our website. I have gone through that incredibly quickly, just because I wanted to give you as much information as possible. But if you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, drop me an email, and obviously anything that we do get in terms of questions or queries, we will put those in a resource to share out with everybody as well. Thank you so much for your time. I'll hand back to Ellen, who strategically left herself off of mute because apparently I'm the only one with the power to unmute people. And hopefully I'll see you guys again in the Q&A.
Thank you. There was, again, lots of information in there. Thank you for sharing that with us, Chloe. and really interesting to see what resources are available for carers to access. Really liking the look of the toolkit on the self-advocacy, as Anne-Marie said, it was so important for her to learn that. So no doubt this will be a resource that can be used. I have seen it. There's some great templates in there for example, keeping note of important contacts, information around meetings that you've had and discussions that you've had. And again, the links have all been added into the chat as far as I can see. They're on the right hand side. So Chloe spoke as well around the caring for someone with pages. We did mention at the start of the session as well, we have got a library of resources on the website, and we have some specific articles in there as well that have been co-produced with carers. So well done to the team for doing that. We have got some questions in the chat, which is lovely. I haven't had an opportunity to have a look through them myself, but I can see that Karen and Kelly have been jumping in and answering those. But I would like to go into some questions with the panel that have come from our Facebook community. We have got a closed Facebook community, so if you are on social media and you do want to join, we can share that link to the page. It's for Carers First Carers only, and it's a really good opportunity to be able to get some peer support, pop some questions in there. Quite often we'll pop some questions in there so we can get some information from carers as well to support with the resources, but it's just a place where you can go and be alongside other carers. So we're going to go in with that first question. Like I've said, they have come up from our Facebook community, so I do need to read them out. So apologies for looking away from the screen. So our first question is, I have been told by another carer that I need to think about what I would do if I couldn't provide care. What do I need to do to ensure my cared for is looked after if there was an emergency and I'm not able to care for them? So I'm going to pass this question over to Chloe to give us an answer.
Absolutely. Firstly, just want to acknowledge that this is a really difficult and sometimes worrying thing to think about. It's almost for some carers to say, if I don't think about it, hopefully it won't happen. But actually planning for this early can really help. Like I said before about that future planning, give people peace of mind and that reassurance that there is a plan in place should it come up. So in response to that question around emergencies, a great first step would be to complete a carer's emergency response plan. Essentially, this is a document which allows you to collate all of that important information about the person that you care for, so that if you were unable to care for any reason, somebody else could come in and step into that caring role a little bit easier. Things like what medical conditions they have, what needs they might have, any allergies, medications they're taking, and even who to contact in terms of family and friends that might be able to support. It's also quite useful if you could include things like the name of their consultant or their GP or something like that, so that if you did have any queries, you'll be able to follow up about that condition more specifically as well. For this to be most useful though, and this is something we spoke about with carers before, for this to be most useful, it's got to be somewhere where it's easily found. So somewhere like on the fridge, by the phone, stuck to the back of the front door, which means that somebody is going to see it. So it's really important that actually the way that you record it is in a way that is friendly for the person if they're able to read it, reads it in a way that they understand it, and the best way to do that is to get them involved in it if they can. Ellen's nodding, so I know this is something that her and I have spoken about quite a bit. So get them involved, get them to talk about maybe their likes and their dislikes, foods that they'll eat as well. Really include those things that actually, if somebody was to come in, that person does would have had some say and control in the care that's happened. It helps to give that sense of control in a time that will otherwise feel quite chaotic. So have multiple copies of it, put it in places that it can easily be found, and make sure that it's up to date. Now, in some areas, actually, the local authority have a carers emergency response service, so they can actually hold on to a copy of this document and implement care for that person if you're unable to care. Now, that is local authority specific, so it is worth having a look to see if that is applicable in your area, but where it is in place, it's definitely worth having a look at. A couple of practical tips, actually, thinking about emergency planning that have come from carers. Helpful to have a key safe. If you have like a key to get into your door, actually knowing that somebody's able to get in to be able to provide that care is really, really useful. And having a go bag for yourself as well as the person you care for. You know, waiting times, if for example, they need to go to hospital in that kind of emergency situation, you know, waiting times in an A&E can be really long. Take a bottle of water. Some people talk about bringing comforts that just make things a little bit easier, a book you haven't read, that kind of thing as well. So definitely having those go bags as a practical tip as well. Hopefully that answers the question.
I think there's some great tips in there. And what I was just going to throw in there was Anne-Marie's tip that she gave earlier around that WhatsApp group or a closed family group, because that's a document that could be shared within that as well. And I think, Chloe, I think the message to get across is by putting this plan in place, it means that should anything happen to you as a carer, you feel reassured that you can deal with your own recovery or whatever the situation is why you can't be caring, knowing that somebody else can step into your shoes. So Chloe's tip about adding in their likes and dislikes, for example, the little quirks maybe about what the person maybe enjoys eating or not eating, just those little added extras means that you have that reassurance that that full package is there. It's not necessarily just the clinical support as well. So thank you for that, Chloe. Great answer. And I think there's been a link popped into the chat as well, because there is a template on our website that you can use. So we have got another question as well that came across from the Facebook community. And this one is, and we touched on it a little bit earlier in the session. So when my husband was in A&E last, I was told that they were considering putting a do not resuscitate order in place. We've never discussed this before, and can they do that without his or our permission? So Kelly already touched on this in her section. So I'm going to ask Kelly to jump in and answer that. Chloe, could you unmute? Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Okay. DNRs, probably one of the most misunderstood documents that I have come across. So first of all, what is it? So a do not resuscitate order, as most people know it, is an order which will allow the medical professionals to not resuscitate somebody. So if they have a heart attack, they can't do chest compressions. It is purely about that resuscitation element. It doesn't concern any other element of care provision at all. Now, these things can be misused. You would have seen in the press that there are a number of young people with mental health and learning difficulties that have had DNRs put on their cases, which families don't agree with. But the fundamental thing really when you're looking at these is to make sure you've got an open dialogue with the individual that has the health problems and the medical professions as well. So discussion should start with a medical professional if there is a risk in the condition that the person's living with that their heart may stop or they may stop breathing. And this is why it's important to have the discussions that we spoke about earlier, where you're talking to individuals about what they want to do. If these discussions are had beforehand, you can put something in writing called an advanced decision, which you can keep with you at times when you're in hospital, that says, if something happens to me and I stop breathing or my heart stops, I do not want you to resuscitate me. This is about keeping the planning part and the decision making with you and not putting it with somebody else. If you want to make sure that there is somebody standing in your shoes at a point this sort of decision could be made, it's really important that you have a health and welfare power of attorney, because these are the types of decisions that your attorneys can make for you. Whilst they cannot force a medical professional to treat you, they are able to say to the medical professional, actually, you're not to provide this treatment. This is not what this individual wanted. Now, resuscitation is incredibly invasive and it's not a particularly nice process. So there are going to be conversations which have to take place about what is going on. So DNRs can be verbal, but most of the hospital authorities will try to put something in writing. So you will have a document that's kept on the medical records, or you can have a document that is kept with you at home. But there are three main circumstances in which the law allows do not resuscitate decisions to be made. So the first one is where the patient who has capacity at the time they need to make the decision asks not to be resuscitated. Okay. The second is where a doctor thinks that any resuscitation is likely to be futile. So CPR isn't going to work. It's not going to bring them back if there is an issue. Or where a doctor has had a full and frank conversation with the patient and the burden of doing the CPR outweighs the benefit to the patients. Now, medical professionals cannot have a blanket policy in place at a hospital or a nursing home that says, if this condition comes in, we do not resuscitate. This is an individual case by case basis. And if somebody recovers and they come out of hospital, that DNR stops, because it is only for that specific situation. If you have somebody that's living in a care home, you need to have these conversations with the care home team. They need to be aware of what thoughts and feelings are. They need to have instructions from the person that they are caring for. They need to be aware that if there is a power of attorney, and they will then complete a specific DNR for the period whilst that individual is in the care home. And that will need to be reviewed. But you can also get a DNR form from your GP, or you can write your own DNR by an advance directive if you are living in the community and you have a strong wish that this is applicable for you. Some of my clients stick it with sticky tape on the fireplace, so it's there. Back door, fridge, medical box, those are the areas that you need to have them. And they will be respected by the medical profession. But DNR is a very icky area. That's probably the easiest way for me to describe it. It is very emotive. It is very time sensitive, and these conversations will only usually be had at the worst point. So pre-planning, which is the theme of today, have those conversations. Yes, they are difficult, but make sure you fully understand what the person you're looking after wants, so that you know you can go into a room at that worst, most emotionally stressed and challenging time, safe in the knowledge that you can act for the person that you care for and make sure their best interests are respected.
Lovely. I think that was a really clear answer there, Kelly. And I think one of the biggest pickups that I took from that was that it's not a static document, that it can be, you could go in on one occasion and it's put in place, and then you go in the next time and it's not there. And I think that's something that's not quite understood. I think the assumption is once that's been put in place, it is there. So that was a really good tip on that. And also, like you said, about if you have got that advanced directive as well, and you've got your own DNR in place, like with the emergency plan, putting it somewhere accessible and easy for people to access. So thank you for that, Kelly. And thank you for answering that. And again, if you've got any other questions or want any more information or anything expanded on that, pop that into our chat, and then we can then get some more information out to you. So moving on to our next question, again from our Facebook community, and the question is, what do I need to think about as a carer when helping someone to move into residential care? I'm going to ask Anne-Marie to jump in and answer this, because I know that she shared with us that now she's supporting her mum, who has now transitioned over into residential care. So I want to see and get her to share her experience on that. So if we could get Anne-Marie on.
Right, for me, I think it was the points to consider, and it is a big change for somebody and for yourself. I think is the first and foremost thing is to get social services involved, have an assessment with them, make sure that you know that when you're talking to them, their recommendations on the most suitable setting based on need. I think that's the most important thing. And to be given choices as well, because you need to do some of your own research as well. Look at care homes. There'll be options given to you via social services, but look into it, talk to people, find out if anybody has got a cared for in any of the residential settings, so you know. And because it is scary and it is a huge change. I think one of the biggest things that comes up, and I think for all of us, is around the cost of funding residential care. And it can be scary because you hear lots of stories about different things, but I would say you need to take it on your own merit on what you're doing. Talk to social services and to organisations like Carers First, and to try and get as much information as possible. And I think it is also worthy to note that local authority funding is means tested. So that's important, because sometimes you could be overpaying for something, or you think you have to self-fund and you go off and do things yourself when you really don't need to. Okay, I think planning for a smooth transition, getting the cared for involved in the choices, talking to them if they've got capacity to do that, and having the conversations about how they would like it to be, what would they like to bring with them. And I am going to add something that actually has amused me this week, is that my mum has asked for 3 things. She's asked for 2 coats and a dolly. I'm not quite sure how that's going to manage in residential, in nursing care. I don't know where she's going with the coats, but you know, it's important to her. So that's what we will bring, and we will make it as homely as possible, because the settings are beautiful and you can make it really nice. One thing I wanted to add as well is when you're helping somebody move in, is to think about what your role is going to look like afterwards, because you may have gone from a really heavy caring role and it's almost like you're made sort of redundant, but you're not. You're still very heavily involved. A lot of things, emotional, financial, everything else you'll still be doing. But it's also, again, about looking at the changes for yourself, how you're going to plan around those changes, because they can be emotive. And the only thing I can say is, for me, it will make me become a daughter again rather than the carer. So that is vitally important to me, and that relationship then with my mum and everything will be so much more different. So thank you.
No, and thank you for sharing that. I think there was some really great points in your answer that you raised there. And I have to say, I think all of us kind of felt for you when you sort of added on the end that the relationship potentially has now changed back around. We hear so many carers who talk to us around the changes in the relationship. They've gone from, you know, having a partner to supporting somebody. So it was really interesting to hear that. And also when you're looking at the moving somebody into a residential care setting or supported living, it is really on an individual basis and the needs of that family. I think, Anne-Marie, I think you said earlier on when you were talking to us around, you was really clear about what you was able to do, what was in best interest for both you and them. So again, it's those big discussions, and I think including them in the discussions. It did make me smile that your mum wants 2 coats brought into the residential care home. Maybe they're having a Christmas party or something, I don't know. But it is those kinds of things that actually will soften that transition across. Her doll might be something that she had in her home, maybe, I'm guessing, that it will bring familiarity. So in that new setting, it's passing that across. And so thank you very much for sharing that. I can see in the chat that we have just put in there an article that is literally around supporting someone to move into residential care. So we are now at the end of our session. Thank you very much to everybody who has joined us, carers and professionals that are in the room that have heard us today. I'd also like to say a special thank you to my panel. I think they've shared some fantastic information today. And we, again, if you've got any questions you want to expand in afterwards, definitely share that with us. And also especially to Anne-Marie, who's opened up her story with us too. For those that are unable to share us to be with us today in the live session, we will be putting this recording online on the Carers Rights Day webpage and also on our Facebook page as well. And we will also have a question and answer resource that we will share with you for all of those questions that we haven't managed to touch today and that have come in through our other avenues and channels too. So again, I'd like to say thank you. I would also like to say Happy Carers Rights Day. There's lots of events happening across the organisation at Carers First, but also nationally Carers UK. So have a little look on our social medias and on our websites of what might be happening in your area. And I know that online and in the media, there will be lots of attention around unpaid carers today and what rights that they have and what support and entitlements that they can access. So I'd like to say thank you again, and I'm going to close off today's session. Thank you very much.